Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome back. Zoya, podcast producer here. We take you to the high and mighty seas this week with S&P Global Market Intelligence on the podcast to introduce us to the concept of dark shipping activity. Matthew Grant returns as host with George Deverees, Product Management Director, who supports insurers by providing key insights on world and commercial shipping. We touch on George's past life on the seas being in the Navy, the concept of dark shipping, and how S&P Global Market Intelligence supports insurance throughout the whole value chain. Well, if you're not already familiar with Instech, where we provide insurance intelligence for the curious, take a look at instech.co to find out what we know and how we can help you. That's pretty much it. Now let's see what George had to say.
George, great to have you back. You're a bit of a podcast regular now with us, but just for those who don't know you, what are you up to at S&P?
Thank you, Matthew. So my name is George Deverees. I'm the Director of Product Management for our Maritime Risk and Compliance suites of products at S&P Global. It means that I monitor and track world shipping, all commercial shipping around the world, and screen them against sanctions liability and pass that data onto markets such as the insurance world.
Fantastic. And actually, not only do you do that now, but you've got past experience of actually being out in the world of shipping directly yourself on board ships. It's always good to have someone that's been there firsthand. We might touch on that later on. But I've also got a bit of surprise for you because we've now got our digital intern who's going to be released to the world shortly. But I went and asked them what do they know about S&P, and this is what they came back and said.
S&P Global Market Intelligence, a division of S&P Global, provides a range of services and solutions tailored for the insurance industry. Their offerings include credit ratings, to assess the creditworthiness of various entities, benchmarks and analytics that assist insurers in evaluating their performance and making informed decisions, data solutions for underwriting, actuarial work, product management, risk management, and investment management. ESG solutions, they provide environmental, social, and governance, ESG, data and resources to help insurers align with sustainability goals. Overall, S&P Global Market Intelligence aims to support insurers throughout the entire insurance value chain by providing critical data and insights.
There you go, George. How was that?
Absolutely fantastic AI sort of précis of what the company does. The only little thing I'll add on is the fact that we are the issue of the IMO number, the International Maritime Organization's number for all vessels and companies. So a really unique position within the market.
Thanks, George, for the IMO and for spelling out the acronym. I believe 300 gross ton in terms of shipping size, that's kind of when you need to have an IMO number. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And engaged in international trade is the only other caveats. But a lot of ships at 300 gross tons will take it as well, regardless of where they're in. I've
got no idea how big that sounds. Very big. Can you make that in sort of terms someone can understand, like length of football pitches or something else?
It's surprisingly not that big. It depending on the size of the ship, obviously you've got the beam, the width of the ship, as well as the length. So really, you're looking for anything from 3/4 of a football pitch upwards.
Right. Okay. So you're tracking all like football pitch sized ships, maybe slightly smaller, around the world, just to bring it into perspective.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So what specifically are you doing for insurers with the analytics you're providing?
Really, what we're trying to do is unpick quite a complex environment. We're living in a very dynamic environment when it comes to sanctions regulations and ownership regulations. We're nearly up to the 10-year mark of the revision of the Marine Insurance Act happened in 2015, and part of that really put the onus on underwriters to understand the ownership structure of the vessels that they underwrite, and that can be a murky old world. Not just that, but then OFAC came in 2021 with their whole lists of what insurers should understand about their vessels and also the ability to track the vessels. So that's we're offering solutions to the headaches of OFAC sanctions and also the marine insurance revision.
George, you know what I'm going to ask you next, don't you?
Yeah, OFAC, Office of Foreign Asset Control. Even hard to think there for a second.
Yeah, every industry likes its acronyms. And then you also mentioned the 2015 Marine Insurance Act. That was, if I've got my facts correct now, the first revision since 1902, which is extraordinary, really, in terms of what the requirements are. But basically, before that, you didn't need to have a tracking device. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the Insurance Act basically put the emphasis on understanding the ownership structure, and also did sort of put a little bit on the fact of tracking or understanding where the ship's trades. It really was the OFAC's requirements under insurers for the tracking.
And you had another comment I was quite intrigued by, which was all navigation is a timestamp. Can you just explain what you meant by that?
Well, that's how we tell where we are in the world, going back to the days of latitude, well, still is latitude and longitude, but how we used to navigate from GMT and turn the clock from the days of sail. Although it's got more sophisticated, it's never progressed from there. So when we're talking about latitude and longitude, we are talking about a fixed time position as the Earth rotates. And so that's where we are at that time. So that's how we navigate, is by times across rather than physical positioning.
That's really fascinating. So if they were increasing the world of digital, even like way back in analog and handwritten ship's logs, you're basically saying is a timestamp has existed for hundreds of years. It just so happens we're using it probably more dynamically today than they were 100 years ago, or even less, of course.
Yeah, with a lot less maths involved as well for the navigator on the bridge.
And so let's talk a little bit now. You talk about the problems you're solving. Who is accessing your data and how might they be using it in their day-to-day?
Yeah, so really we run the whole gambit of marine insurance. If we're looking at the underwriters and the brokers, so the brokers can use our system to ensure that the information they're getting from a ship manager, from an owner, is correct. The underwriter can also look at the information, the vessel characteristics, the trading patterns of the vessel, to understand if there's any warranties or exclusions they need to write on the slip and the insurance contract. Their claims personnel can look back at historic AIS data to see tracking of vessels, any potential navigational claims, collision claims, cargo shortage claims. They can see where they've been, which ports they've been into, which berth they've been into, right back to the actuaries who are doing their once in 5, 10, 15, 20 year loss predictions.
Okay, it's quite a lot in there. So I'm just going to come back and sort of unpick a little bit. So you mentioned AIS in passing. Essentially, it's the automated device that gives out a signal for each ship. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It stands for Automatic Identification System, and it's a very simple system. I always liken it to that one kid I think we all had in school, the show off, who would stand on his desk and shout, "I'm here, I'm here, I'm here" all the time, and that's really what it does.
Right, unless they're being naughty and they say and they're going hiding, and I guess you can continue the analogy, and they don't say where they are, which is what happens with ships sometimes.
Yeah, they firmly get underneath the desk. Yeah.
So in the way you describe the different use cases for insurers, there's a couple of ones that I want to come back to. So first of all, when somebody is either renewing a risk or looking at it for the first time, so they'll look at the ship's history, is that right? And then they'll take a view on, is this something I want to underwrite, or maybe not because it's had some bad history. That's one use case, is it, at the point of underwriting?
Yes, certainly. You can look back at sort of the incidents, the vessel inspection routines, who's owned, who's operated it, who's managed it, how well they've managed it to a certain degree, and sort of give more of a feel of how the vessel is being run, managed, operated, where she's trading, as opposed to just flat figures on a sheet of paper.
The underwriter, is that now set up as like these data tools, having like a sort of traffic light type system? So it might process all the information and come back and say either like, this is fine, this is all straightforward, go and renew it, or write it, or red, don't do it, or amber, take a more close look, or do the underwriters literally have to go through all the different data and figure it out for themselves?
We do use the traffic light system, although we are somewhat data agnostic. So we tend to say we highlight areas of concern for people to make an informed decision upon. So we use, exactly as you said, Matthew, a traffic light system where we basically say green, yeah, she's good; amber, there's something you should look at; and then red, stop, there really is something you need to look at, and make a decision on from there.
Okay, so let's go for the green case. So, or the amber that's kind of cleared it when they've looked more carefully. So once that ship is on risk, or the fleet is on risk, there's also like more dynamic ways so that somebody in the insurance company can track. So how does that work? Is it the same person? Are they given alerts? What's the process by which they sort of learn if you use your schoolboy analogy, somebody's hiding under a desk as opposed to just normal activities?
The way we generally see underwriters using the tool, for example, is to monitor their book of business. So as you quite rightly say, it is a dynamic tool. It's not static. It updates every single day. So if a vessel comes under sanctions, it will alert the next day. If she goes out of AIS signal for more than 12 hours, the system will alert. So the idea of the system is to give underwriters more time back to continue managing their book of business and to sit there passively but actively working in the background. So it's a passive system, but it will actively send you alerts when there are areas of concern that it needs to highlight to you.
Brilliant. And I think I've got this right. So you're providing the service in a couple of different ways. So you can give people API feeds. So they just want the raw information. And we'll talk a bit about who you're partnering with on that in a minute. Or people can go the whole way and use the S&P dashboard or interface to use that, but just what you described there. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely correct. And that's what we're seeing more and more in the insurance world as people are building out their own pricing tool, their own risk matrices and the like. A lot more in the insurance world are taking those bespoke APIs where they can pick and choose bits of the data to augment their already well-established in-house systems. But we do also have, as you said, the Maritime Intelligence Risk Suite, which is a web-based user interface, which is very much our shop window. It paints a pretty picture of all the data that we have underneath it.
And then, George, we're hearing a bit about dark activity, bad things going on right now. As always, there are things in the news. Just now, it's Israel's invasion of Lebanon. What are you helping people with understand in that kind of situation?
So first and foremost, it's sort of understanding that AIS is not a silver bullet when it comes to tracking vessels. It was always designed as a safety and navigation tool, and good actors will continue to use it in its correct way as a safety and navigation tool, and then secondary as a tracking functionality. But then what we see is, based on the history of AIS, it's based on VHF, very high frequency radio waves. So there is a myriad of reasons why signals may not be received by either aerials or satellites. And that's where we are very careful. We will say suspected dark activity, and we will give you a probability of what may have happened. As you quite rightly say, Matthew, at the moment, we live in a very dynamic world. And so I will never say turn off the AIS, because that is in contravention of the safety of life at sea, which all ships adhere to. So especially down sort of the Bab el-Mandeb Southern Red Sea, where even just yesterday we've seen an unmanned surface vehicle attack a merchant ship. There are vessels that won't transmit while they're going down there to try and hide. And that's where we really look to try and track these vessels.
Interesting. I'm thinking also in ships coming out of Ukraine, grain ships now that I know are kind of hugging the coast, whereas before they might have taken a more direct route. I don't know if they're turning off their AIS, but I can see why they might. But what does that do for insurance? Is there some agreement that underwriters might have that if somebody, because I know Lloyd has been very supportive of providing insurance, even though effectively they're kind of moving through a war zone. Is there a kind of special case made there by underwriters to say, well, actually, we understand you might turn your AIS off, or don't do always, you don't turn it off, but you're not transmitting or something? Yeah,
ship security plans. There is the authority from the company security officer of the shipping company to allow a vessel not to transmit on her AIS in a heightened state of security. And as long as that's transmitted to the insurance company, that's what they're doing, whether that's under warranty or a binder as they're setting up the insurance contracts, or it's transmitted dynamically, then that's how they can understand it. Strangely enough, by a vessel hugging the coast, it actually plays a lot more into ability to track the vessel, because as I was saying, the AIS was designed as a safety and navigation tool, and its backbone is VHF radio. That's where all the receivers are, is on the coastline. So the closer you are into shore, the easier it is to track the vessel, and it's easier for us to understand that she's going down the coast, going from antenna to antenna to antenna. And we can sort of shoot up, to use a navigational term that's forward-looking for your next marker. We can say, okay, she's going down the coast, she's gone from A to B to C, we should see her aerial D. And if we don't, then we potentially know there's a problem. Actually, by hugging the coast, the vessels are doing everyone a favour, making them easier to track. It may not be the standard navigational routes, but once you understand the pattern of what is normal, or the new normal, then yeah, it makes it much, much more easier.
And something else you mentioned before was another signal you look out for is a ship turning a 90 degree angle. What's happening when you're seeing that?
Yeah, so this is what we term as deceptive practices, where people are trying to be clever and maintain an AIS position, while in truth the vessel has gone dark and is doing something illicit. However, the technology hasn't quite caught up with vessel characteristics, vessel movements. So we have examples of vessels sort of transiting around the Cape of Good Hope and going up the western seaboard of Africa. and saying they're transiting up there, or they're drifting, they're waiting for orders, and the vessel, say a Suezmax or a VLCC, is doing what can only be described as handbrake turns in the sea and doing 90-degree positional changes, which even when I was driving warships, we would struggle to do with splitting shafts. So single screw big VLCC, yeah, she just can't do that. So it's people manipulating the AAS nanoseconds message to try and say the vessel is still there, where in truth she's turned off and she's off elsewhere.
Okay, I want to just come back. You said that in passing, but it sounded quite exciting. So you were driving warships, and if I understood correctly, if you've got like twin propellers, you can maneuver them more easily, swerve your warships like on a slalom, or were you in the kind of single screw, kind of move more slowly?
No, I drove the Ferrari to the seas. I was in frigates, so yeah, we could go full ahead on one shaft, full astern on the other shaft, throw the wheel hard over, and yeah, pretty much handbrake turner.
So what's the sort of turning circle of a frigate when you can do that?
This was always a maneuver we used to do when we were hunting pirates. So we would be going full ahead on both engines and handbrake turn when there was a beamless skiff and stop 80 yards ahead of her. So we'd cross the T. So to turn the advance and transfer of that turn, so how far you go ahead and then sideways, was in the region of 120 yards. It was, yeah, the engineers didn't like us at all, but it got the job done.
Wow, normally you kind of see that with someone on a police car driving in front of somebody to stop the car, but you're doing it with a massive, great frigate. That sounds fascinating. So, getting us back on track, a bit about Cirrus, providing them the data. It'd be just good to know what your kind of strategy is and who else you're working with in that space.
We provide their background data for compliance screening and also for vessel characteristics. Within the insurance world writ large, we work with a lot of the major underwriters, a lot of the major brokers, and some of the smaller starting up broking houses who really just want vessel characteristics so they can sense check the fleets, the vessels that they're bringing it into the market. Underwriters, especially the bigger underwriting houses, are using their in-house data to make more informed underwriting decisions and to make their books more profitable. And they're using our data to augment their claims data, their underwriting ratios, to better write the risks.
There's a theme I see recurring here, which is organizations collecting that data. They don't always know what they're going to need, and they kind of sometimes find after the fact a claim comes in, or they look back over multiple years' data and find that actually the data they've been collecting is really quite useful as an indication of what's going forward. Are you seeing quite an increase now in the sophistication of insurers and underwriters and how they're using data and analytics for underwriting? And you mentioned claims as well.
Yeah, absolutely, certainly. As you rightly said, where data and underwriters, brokers used to be very siloed in their own little claims world, underwriting world, we're seeing a lot more of cross-pollination of those departments talking to each other to better inform the business writ large and making that more informed underwriting decision.
There's a whole wealth of data now available from ships now in terms of like monitoring engine performance and I think for fuel quality or certainly refueling. So in addition to like going out and looking for open source data, are you also reselling or enhancing other data sources that might be proprietary, but add more value to your clients as well?
Yeah, so one of the great things is now being part of S&P is we have a wealth of additional data sources that we never used to have as part when we was just solely IHS Markets. We have a lot of data when it comes to the movement of goods around the world and the pricing. Also, we are pulling data from a lot of disparate sources, such as the EU when it comes to vessel reporting for their carbon emissions. So we can bring all that data into one area for underwriters to make that more informed decision. And one of the key things that we're looking to do further down the line is obviously looking down the environmental route of carbon footprints and stuff like that. We can certainly track how vessels are performing, even to a certain extent how certain types of goods are performing when it comes to movements of goods around the world and how much carbon they emit. One of my colleagues a couple of years ago wrote a paper on how much your Nike's carbon footprint costs because they managed to track the trainers from the Far East into America just in time for Black Friday.
Fascinating. That is becoming a bigger and bigger area, isn't it? That's sort of, it's part of what's sometimes referred to as Scope 3 emissions, which is the emissions that your supply chain are creating when you're buying, or particularly when you're underwriting. So I can see that could be a whole other growth area. Well, George, you covered a lot there. As you look forward next 12 months, what are you excited about in terms of things that are going to be happening in your world?
And so the big thing, and especially in, say, the world we currently find ourselves in, is we are scoping out the ability to track vessels not just by AIS, but by other emittents that come off the vessels. So really looking to narrow that window of how a vessel can hide, in inverted commas. We know there are certain things that merchant seamen will not turn off, such as radars when they're navigating at sea. So we're looking at building up databases of those navigational radars, attributed them to vessels. So if we do lose the AIS signal for whatever reason, we have a defense in depth, something else to fall back on to continually to track that vessel. So really trying to help, especially the marine insurance world, keep tabs on their vessels to understand where they're going. Even if we don't have that IMO number through the AIS, we have another signal emittance to be able to track the vessel. So really pushing it into the 21st century. I should also mention not only what we've got coming, but brand hot off the presses in October this year, we've released the ability to visualize all of the suspected dark activity that we have categorized within our portal. And so it gives the insurers the ability to look not just currently, but back in history at potential hotspots of the world, sort of off the port limits of Fujairah, off Lebanon to a certain extent at the moment, in the Black Sea, of areas where vessels have gone suspected dark. And so it gives you that pattern of life indicator to, again, hopefully make that more informed decision that if you've got vessels transit that area, this may happen, and you may want to write your warranties and exclusions into your contract as such.
And you've got all these people with mobile phones on their ships. Presumably there's a way of tracking that, not everywhere in the world, but I mean, people kind of want to signal on their mobile phone. Has someone already done that, or is that my new big adventure I can go after?
No, that's certainly a bit of people are definitely looking into it. That's more in the government space, truth be told. But that's certainly been looked at. One of the other things that we do, and that's sort of, as you said, there's so much technology in a vessel now. We are now incorporating local pictures from vessels. So vessels that have not just that transmitter, that kid stood on the table shouting, "I'm here," but it's also got the kid next to him scribbling notes of who else is in the class and passing it to him. So we have got the ability now to get those local pictures and really help augment the satellite and terrestrial network that we have.
Well, George, that's been fascinating. If people want to learn more about anything you're offering, what's the best way to sort of understand a bit more about that?
The easiest way is to go to our websites. I was recently at IUMI, and I had the honour to meet a lot of marine underwriters at that conference. So we will be at trade shows going ahead, certainly in the insurance world. So look out for the S&P booth at the next trade show.
Great. And the final question, if you compare your life at sea in the Navy with life and insurance, which one's most exciting for you?
If you excuse the pun, they both had their ups and downs. The insurance world just blew my mind when I was operating into the breadth and density of everything that goes on. So from, and equally, I wasn't